I didn't get the memo. I didn't realize that we were cosplaying today.
You're going to have to elaborate that for me.
If you're watching on Patreon, you can see this. Charlotte is full out Leslie Abramson of the Menendez trial.
Hey, I'll take it.
But like substantially better looking.
Well, thank you. That's very flattering.
But it's uncanny and I'm loving it.
I think, you know what? I am just missing the like box bleached blonde hair.
Yeah.
And maybe a few more cigarettes under my belt. And
you're giving powerful woman today.
Oh, thank you.
I should have worn my like polo shirt and my like popped up collar or something.
You know what? I'm wearing a jumpsuit and I'm a sucker for a jumpsuit. Love a good jumpsuit. Actually, speaking of jumpsuits, I may or may not have ordered a replica Ripley alien jumpsuit. Did I mention that already?
No, but I love it.
Yeah. So spent some money on the internet and that should be coming hopefully before Halloween. We'll see.
That's a good thing to spend money on.
Yeah, if it comes before Halloween, I will wear it for recording because we will be recording on the 31st of October.
We will. Oh, yeah. That's exciting. Yeah. We'll both dress up.
Yeah, if it doesn't come in time, I'll definitely dress up as something else, but stay tuned.
Perfect. I'm down.
All right.
Shall we?
I guess so. Hello, everyone. I'm Charlotte.
And I'm Dina. Welcome to the Grim Curriculum.
So we've received a whole bunch of amazing emails and messages from many of you regarding part 1 of this series. We know that this case is currently being covered by a lot of different people, and it means a lot that folks are letting us know that they feel we are doing the story justice. So thank you, thank you.
Thank you. And with that being said, we're not going to mess around too much here because we have a lot to say. We're going to dive right back into the story.
You betcha. So this is part 2 of our Menendez brothers series. Last week, we introduced you to Erik and Lyle Menendez, 2 brothers who are currently serving life without parole for the murder of their parents, Jose and Kitty.
We don't normally cover the trials of our subjects in great detail. That being said, due to the information that came out after their crimes, we are taking a bit of a different approach today.
So today we're going to be discussing both trials as well as where the brothers are now and why the case is being talked about so much 3 decades after the fact.
We will also be addressing the news that there is a very real chance that the brothers may soon be free.
So we have a lot to cover here, so let's get into it.
We last left off with the now infamous 911 call that was made after the deaths of the parents.
The brothers had already left the home once in order to get rid of the murder weapons, clothes, and establish an alibi. They returned expecting the police to have found the grisly scene. However, they were shocked that no one had reported it.
When the police arrived on the scene, the brothers were not suspects. In fact, Jose was so disliked that there were a number of people that could have sought out to hurt him.
There were a few different theories right off the bat. One included it being a former employee or even the mob.
It was clear that the 2 had been murdered with a shotgun, but there were no shells present at the site. Also, it was very evident that the crime was one based out of great rage due to the number of shots that were fired at the victims.
The brothers were both present at the scene and were both completely inconsolable.
Erik would later say that he was shocked that they weren't actually suspects. Their alibi was shoddy and they had gunpowder residue all over their hands. This was missed by the police.
The missing shotgun shells were even in Erik's vehicle, which was still at the scene.
He even said that if the police had actually questioned him to a larger extent, that he would have broken down and told them the truth then and there. Something I find really interesting that they pointed out in the latest documentary, they interviewed the prosecutor of the case, who I have a lot to say about.
Oh, I've seen some clips of her. She's a piece of work.
That's a nice way to say it. One of the things that she points out, though, that I do agree with is that police in Beverly Hills were very different in the sense that they had customer service. So we're in a very ritzy, very rich area, and customer service, those are her words, but I do find them very, very accurate. I would imagine that the police took extra care as to not offend anybody or cause bigger problems than they already had.
Well, I would imagine that being in that sort of neighborhood, that sort of environment, there were people with a lot of money and people that if anything were to go wrong, if they were to deem the police unseemly or like not having the best bedside manner, that's when police departments get sued.
Absolutely.
And they would have wanted to avoid that at all costs.
They were very careful and they were definitely tiptoeing around the fact.
The brothers were interviewed around 4 a.m. They claimed that they had entered the house through the front door and made their way to the family room due to the fact that they heard faint sounds on their TV.
The police immediately questioned this because one of the first things that they noticed when they entered the room was that the TV was at an incredibly high volume.
They also claimed that one of the things they noticed when they arrived back at the home was that the room was full of smoke. This was not true.
Now, dear listeners, whether you've been listening to our show for a long time or you're new, you're probably aware of the fact that more often than not, a person is likely to be murdered by someone they know. Once again, this was Beverly Hills, and it seemed impossible for two well-off sons to be capable of murdering their parents.
Especially in such a violent manner.
One of the investigators would later say that it was a surprise to him that the boys appeared to be in such good spirits very shortly after the crime, especially considering that the brothers chose to live in the home after the murders had been committed.
You would think that if you had gone through something like this, the last thing you would want to do is live in the house where your parents were killed, especially if you didn't know who had done it.
The brothers would say that after the death of their parents, they felt lost. Like we mentioned in part 1, they were used to their father controlling every single aspect of their lives, and for the first time, they felt free.
In the following days, members of their family came from all across the country. They grieved with the brothers, not knowing that they were very responsible for their own heartbreak.
A memorial service was held at the Princeton University Chapel. And we talked about this last week. Those of you who saw the Ryan Murphy series, we want to remind you, the Milli Vanilli scene where they play a very inappropriate one of their songs at the funeral did not happen.
What did, in fact, happen was that Lyle delivered what would be called a beautiful eulogy.
The thing is, it was a little bit too well put together according to many who witnessed it. Lyle came off calm, cool, and collected, which surprised many people.
It seemed to many that after the death of his father, Lyle took on a patriarchal role. This surprised a lot of people because, like we said last week, he was known to be a bit of a goofy kid who was not one to take anything seriously. He was calm, mature, and spoke of wanting to become a business mogul and follow in his father's footsteps.
Lyle also hired bodyguards and stated that he was worried for his own safety.
It was around this time that the shopping began.
They bought a Porsche, a Jeep Wrangler, 3 Rolexes, and among other things, a Mr. Buffalo chicken wing restaurant.
Erik even abandoned his university dreams and instead hired a tennis coach that cost him $50,000 for the year.
They really were living their best lives, or at least that's what it looked like.
Decades later, Erik would say that all of this spending was in an effort to bury their pain and distract themselves from the fact that they both didn't want to be alive any longer.
It's easy to see why not everyone would believe this. I think everyone grieves differently.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And you never know how someone's going to react. And I think if they hadn't killed their parents, this could be believable. But considering it was them who did it, I can definitely understand why the majority of people disagree with that statement.
Oh, 100%. But from a mental health standpoint, if you're, for lack of a better phrase, trying to fill a hole inside of yourself, a lot of what times people do is spend,
Yep.
trying to make themselves feel good about an overwhelming sadness. The brothers spending all of this money was definitely enough to catch the attention of the investigators.
With some digging, they found out that the guns had been purchased using a stolen ID that belonged to a friend of the brothers. The weapons themselves were still nowhere to be found, and they never would be.
They were brought in for questioning 7 months after the deaths of their parents. Police would say that it appeared that the motive was money. This included a $14 million inheritance.
Something interesting to note, considering the media frenzy that would follow all of this, is that the press was mysteriously tipped off about the arrests ahead of time, and they witnessed everything.
During all of this, Erik is still seeing Dr. Oziel, a psychologist with a questionable moral complex. Oziel had started recording his sessions with Erik. Eventually, he invited Lyle to come talk to him as well.
During that first session together, Erik found out that his brother had told Oziel everything. Erik then reacted by threatening him. What the brothers didn't know was that Dr. Oziel had one of his patients, Judalon, who he was also having an affair with, listening in on the conversations. She reported what she heard to the police.
Lyle was arrested first, and Erik would be picked up shortly after. He was overseas participating in a tennis tournament in Israel. They caught him as he was coming off the plane.
To members of the public, this seemed like a bizarre twist in the story. It was all over the news in the United States, Canada, and various other countries.
And immediately, the public was out for blood.
Family members, on the other hand, were shocked.
Lyle specifically told family members that this was all a misunderstanding and it would be cleared up.
Jose's mother even appeared in an interview crying where she stated that it couldn't possibly be them.
The first trial began on June 14th, 1993, a whopping 3 years and 3 months after the murders.
The majority of the family showed up to the first trial in support of the brothers. Erik and Lyle would later say that they couldn't possibly tell them what they had done or confess to them the reasoning behind it. They claimed that they didn't want to destroy their father's reputation.
Selecting the jury was a challenge from the start. In an ideal situation, you want a group of people who are non-biased and not aware of the details of the crimes. This was nearly impossible since the media had been reporting about it for years at this point.
The trial for the brothers was set to happen at the same time. However, both Lyle and Erik had their own jury. A lot of the jury members were interviewed for the latest documentary. And one of the things that bothers me is one of them says, "I had never seen a murderer before. As far as I know, he was a murderer," when referring to Erik. That shows to me that the number of those responsible for being unbiased went into the trial with opinions already formed.
Absolutely. And to admit that as well.
Yeah.
Because usually when it comes to jury selection, from what I understand, is you have the usual jury of 12, but the jury pool starts much larger than that. And they kind of interview each jury member to make sure that they're not biased, right? And like, could they have, personal experiences that might make them lean one way or another, right? They're all kind of vetted in that sense. So for them to come out after the fact and be like, "Yep, he looked like a murderer to me," that's, I don't know, big red flag.
It's scary.
Yeah, absolutely.
It was around this time that a brand new channel had been launched. It was called Court TV.
We love Court TV around here.
We really do. Those of you who are regular listeners to the show know that we do. We talk about it all the time. This was one of the very first trials that they featured, which obviously only helped add to the notoriety.
Oh, 100%. Attorney Leslie Abramson represented Erik. She was described by media by saying,
"This little 4'11" Little Orphan Annie lookalike is 104 pounds of pure dynamite."
Well, you said I look like her today. I'm certainly bigger than Leslie Abramson. Holy cow. Because I'm a slim gal, but I'm not that small.
You are her with a lot less cigarettes and a whole lot more power.
I love that. Thank you so much. Although welcome. I will say she's a baddie, Leslie.
Oh my God, I love her.
Leslie already had quite the reputation. She was known for taking on difficult trials and saving over a dozen people from death row.
Representing Lyle was Jen Lansing. She was a skilled lawyer, but not nearly as tenacious as Leslie. However, it was clear that she cared about her clients.
On the side of the prosecution was Pamela Bozanich.
I wrote out a blurb about her and I had to get rid of half of it. And as you can see, I already have a lot written to begin with. I could complain about her for hours.
I saw a very pointed interview which did not leave me with a good impression of her. And she's kind of sitting there with her dog in her lap. And she's vicious.
Apparently, she did receive a lot of hate after the documentary came out, and I can see why. I'm not going to lie. She is one of the most irritating people that I have ever had the displeasure of listening to in a very long time, because there's a few things she says. We're going to get to them. But something she says about the case being covered on TikTok, she goes, "Well, why don't we just vote on TikTok instead of having trials? By the way, all of you TikTok people, I'm armed. I have guns everywhere."
Okay.
That's nice, dear.
To be fair, is she receiving death threats and shit? I would imagine she gets her fair share, I'm sure. But lady, chill.
I would think that if I didn't know what she was like during the trial, which there's one thing in particular we're going to get to that she said that made me see red.
Okay.
And then also when talking about Leslie, she says, I would tell you what I think about her, but I don't want to get sued. I hear she has no money now and I want to keep my house.
Dang. That's cunty.
Right?
Oh.
She's a bitch. Like, holy crap, woman. Like, and honestly, it's like, I'm not exaggerating. I'm not trying to be a mean girl. I'm a nice girl and I'm trying real hard. But like this woman, I was like, I'm watching the documentary. I'm sitting there with my arms crossed and I'm just like,
no.
mm-mm.
So the prosecution was arguing that the brothers killed their parents in cold blood for the money, but the defense had a different reason. They claimed that the brothers did it to escape a lifetime of physical and sexual abuse at the hands of their father.
And let's talk about that for a second, because this is 1993. The fact of the matter is that sexual abuse when it came to boys and men was something that was simply not talked about.
Mm-hmm. I mean, even at that point, it was hardly something that you talked about when it involved women and men.
Very true.
Never mind men and boys.
Especially, again, these are two fit, strong,
privileged boys.
Yes.
Yeah. Dear listeners, the claims made by the brothers are incredibly graphic and genuinely heartbreaking. They stated that they had both been sexually abused in essentially every single way by their father since they were very young children, something they say their mother was fully aware of. This abuse continued until shortly before the murders.
We aren't going to go into full detail. If you want to know more, you can see the trial footage. While they did enter a non-guilty plea, they didn't say that they didn't kill their parents. They were trying to say that what they did didn't warrant first degree and the death penalty.
Meanwhile, the prosecution claimed that this was all a lie, and they wanted to see the brothers dead.
The defense presented over 50 witnesses, including family and medical professionals. Diane Vandermolen, a cousin of the brothers, testified saying that years prior, Lyle had told her about the sexual abuse. When she told Kitty what was said, Kitty became irate and called Lyle a liar.
Physical evidence, including nude photos of the brothers as children, were presented. The photos had been taken by Jose. Prosecution argued that this was not done by him, despite the fact that it was proven that these photos were kept by Kitty.
I'm going to chime in with another quote from Pamela, the prosecutor, regarding what was said in court. This, I believe, is one of the many reasons she is being attacked in the public after the documentary. She said these words, and I quote, "Men could not be raped because they lack the necessary equipment to be raped."
What does that even mean?
This was after the brothers testified that they were orally and anally raped by their father. This woman can jump off a cliff.
I'm so dumbfounded. What do you mean? Oh my God. Okay. Well, I think we all know that that's not fucking true. Yeah. And if you don't know that that's not true, then please have a word with yourself and seek some therapy. Jesus Christ. Here's something very interesting to note, though, on the matter. When the final verdict came in, the majority of female jurors voted for manslaughter, while the male jurors voted for first-degree murder. Isn't that interesting?
One of the things that they talk about a lot with the trial is something called the sweater defense.
Oh, okay.
So what they did, and this was a tactic that Leslie would use, and she had done it before.
Okay.
So this was kind of her thing. She had them dress in sweaters.
Okay, yes, because I can definitely picture the images that we've seen of them. Yeah.
Glasses on, she tried to make them look younger than they were, because once the trial had rolled around, they were in their 20s. They weren't children.
Oh, I see. So it's like, okay, we're trying to present you more as boys, not men.
Yes. And it's interesting that you say that, because throughout the trial, she refers to them as these boys, the boys.
Yes.
She doesn't talk about them as men, and she really tries to downplay their age and make them seem younger. And I think that resonated with a lot of women. And it was interesting to me, the difference of feeling between the men and the women in the jury.
Yeah, that is very interesting, because you can imagine if they walked in, and it's funny, Wade Wilson's coming to mind for some reason, but like they're both pretty tall guys, like you say, good looking. I mean, it is 3 years past at this point that they've been in prison waiting for this. But if they walked in very tall, very proud in suits. It's giving off a lot more powerful, masculine.
Yes.
Perhaps could be interpreted by the jury as aggressive or violent because, I mean, we've already talked about how someone had kind of already made up their mind.
Yes.
Right. And so I think in that sense, for Leslie to sort of be like, hey, this is how you're going to dress. Because if we think about it, yes, they are men now, but they had been abused their entire lives, according to the defense.
Yeah.
So the crime happened when they were boys, not men.
Yes, exactly.
Interesting.
After months of deliberation, the jury was found deadlocked, and thus a second trial was set.
The second trial was, in a lot of ways, the total opposite from the first one. For starters, cameras were not allowed in the courtroom. The jury was asked to disregard anything they knew about the first trial. And this was essentially impossible again, considering how it had been heavily reported on by news on an international level. If you owned a TV, you knew about the trial.
The judge said that Erik and Lyle were not women, and therefore the battered women defense was not valid. Much of the evidence regarding their abuse was omitted.
Erik testified in this trial. However, Lyle did not. Neither did their teachers or family who had before. The jury was not given the option of manslaughter, just innocence or first-degree murder.
The reality of it is that they were not innocent. The defense was trying to go for a less harsh sentence due to the circumstances, and that was completely squashed. One of the arguments that is made about this that I personally agree with is like, well, why was this trial so much more out for blood, so to speak?
Right.
And I think the argument that is best made there is O.J. Simpson, someone who had been friends with Jose. He threw the football around their living room. He was in a Hertz commercial.
Oh, wow.
And Jose was in charge of Hertz.
Yeah.
So they knew each other. He was found innocent just prior to this second ruling. And the judge and the jury, I think that they had a lot of pressure on them to make an example out of the brothers, because at that point they were like, oh, well, you just have to be rich and you get away with murder.
Oh, you could be very well onto something there. It wouldn't surprise me if that were the case.
I think that's why they got rid of the cameras, because they didn't want another media spectacle and they didn't want it to seem like they're favoring anybody or trying to make anybody seem better. They wanted to get this trial done, get them put away, and have everybody move on, because people were not, well, a lot of people were happy with the OJ ruling. We do know this now, but people, for the most part, were quite upset by it.
Yes, absolutely. It's interesting how these events kind of fall in the same kind of eras, but you don't think about them happening at the same time. Because to me, it's like OJ is one completely sensational thing, and the Menendez brothers is another. So it's kind of odd that it's happening all around the same time.
One of the brothers literally ran into OJ at the jail and was like, hey, OJ, because he was in like a special unit that was for like almost like a celebrity unit. And he saw OJ and he was like talking to him about his trial, and they were kind of chatting, and OJ knew who they were. And yeah, it's crazy how reality overlaps like that.
Well, they certainly did make an example out of them in the end. They were found guilty and sentenced to life in prison without parole.
They were separated and sent to 2 different maximum security prisons, and they would not be reunited for almost 3 decades.
But where are they now?
Lyle has spent many years pursuing a higher education, and Erik, on the other hand, he found art. Apparently, he could barely draw a stick figure when he first went in. And now he paints like 12 hours a day. He does these beautiful oil paintings, murals. He communicates with a lot of the members of his family and sends them art.
Oh, wow. Well, hey, you know what? When you have days and days and days to yourself, and I mean, they've been in prison for a long time now, you're going to develop some skills, I guess. Or, I mean, you could waste away.
Yeah,
but
you gotta do something.
I mean, you may as well pass the time.
Both of the men are now married, some more than once.
Yeah.
The Menendez family members, for the most part, are all still in touch with them.
In recent years, more victims of Jose Menendez have come to light, one of them being a former member of Menudo, a band he had signed.
Lyle and Erik speak about sexual abuse of boys. They not only receive countless letters from victims, but are also known as a safe space for other prisoners to confide in.
Wow.
So in the documentary, the brothers talk about how sexual abuse towards men and boys is no longer something that people think doesn't exist or isn't talked about.
Yep.
Because nowadays, especially after the Me Too movement, survivors are believed.
Yes, absolutely they are.
Like we're not perfect yet with that, but it's a lot better. And it is a new generation of people, many of which weren't even born when the murders happened. That includes us.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I was born in 1993. So, like, the trials were already happening.
Yeah, I was born 1990. So, like, right after all of this, right? Society now understands abuse better. And if this trial had happened now, we would have seen a completely different outcome, I think.
Well, and even just down to the little things we mentioned before, Erik had the shotgun shells in his vehicle. You know, if they had dug through that faster, or if they had tested them for gunpowder residue faster, all of this sort of stuff, right, would have perhaps changed the outcome of things. Also, I mean, yes, this happened in the 90s. It's not that long ago in the grand scheme of things, but we've still come leaps and bounds when it comes to technology, especially in forensics.
Yeah, absolutely.
Or, you know, and like you say, we're just in a different era in culture wise, I think. And so would this have been looked at very differently when it comes to like the sexual abuse and all that kind of thing? Hard to say, but I mean, looks like things may be changing. Because on November 26, which is not that far away, a new hearing will be held regarding their fate. We will be doing an update episode about this, and obviously we will keep you posted.
Leslie Abramson was not involved in the recent documentary, but was quoted as saying,
30 years is a long time. I'd like to leave the past in the past. No amount of media nor teenage petitions will alter the fate of these clients. Only the courts can do that, and they have ruled.
That surprised me.
It did, because I've also seen another clip of her where I believe a reporter is trying to get her to interview or answer a question. And she's basically like, nope, I don't want to talk about it. Client attorney privilege. Like, and people were like, wow, even after all this time, she's still like, no, I'm not talking about it.
Yeah. And she didn't appear in the interview, like I said, or like you said, but she wrote them this letter, and this is a part of the letter. And to me, that I was just surprised, because you would think if you had defended them and you essentially failed,
you'd think you'd want another shot at that, perhaps.
Yeah. And it's not like we're going to see a new court hearing by any means. There will not be a new jury. This will be a judge deciding, okay, you guys can go.
Yeah. Or you get parole now. We've changed our mind. You're allowed parole. So with all that, I mean, what are your thoughts?
I have many.
Okay. Let me hear them.
I've been holding on to these since the start of the first episode. Okay. We talk about her all the time. Gypsy Rose. She is out.
She sure is.
We are seeing things get reversed, and we are seeing with a new set of eyes people that are going free. I'm not saying they should not have spent any time in jail.
Because again, we've said it the whole time throughout this series. They did it.
They are murderers.
But are they justified?
I think there is never a justification for killing. I want to preface by saying that, because I don't want to sound like I'm defending what they're doing. But if we're calling it self-defense, I think this could have been seen as a form of it. Now, let's go back. And I'm not saying we should have had a different outcome necessarily back then. I think that after 30 some odd years, they have been well behaved. They have gone out of their way to better themselves and to do something for survivors of abuse. They're not out there getting into fights. They're not doing negative things. They're trying to be positive. They are, one of them is a stepdad. Like they obviously aren't going to have kids. They can't have conjugal visits, but they're parental figures. Their family stands by them. Which is the family of the victims are standing by them.
Yeah.
I think after 30 years, it is time to say, hey, you know what? You did what you did. I think they've served their time. I genuinely do. And I might get some hate for that. I really do think that they have served their time. And I think that they should be eligible for parole. And I'm saying that comparing it to the Canadian justice system, which we talk about a lot. You get parole. In Canada, a life sentence is 25 years.
Yep.
They've done more than that. And I think that for a case for them to be held without parole for the rest of their lives if that second trial didn't happen the way that it did, I might feel differently. I do not think, due to the media coverage and the way that the second trial was presented, that they received a fair trial.
I don't think so either. But I don't know. I mean, right off the bat with that jury member saying, "Now they look like murderers to me," as I've said, that already skews it one way or another. You've already kind of made up your mind. I'm not sure how. I mean, maybe they kept that to themselves at the time when they were being interviewed for the jury member position.
I think that even if she hadn't said that out loud, she's still thinking it. And she is still making her decision based off of that.
Yeah.
You cannot decide whether someone is guilty or innocent if you've already looked at them and said, that's murder.
Well, and if someone else has also come out, because I've heard many people, or rather seen it on the internet in various comment sections and whatnot, and they're saying, well, if they were being abused like this and they both come together and we're both being abused and we're talking about this and okay, mom knows about it and dad's doing this, were there other options like going to the authorities, reporting it? Now, I understand when you're in an abuse situation and you're a child and you've been going through this, it does something different to your brain, right? Like the development it's twisted and traumatized.
Well, one of the things that one of them said, now that you mentioned that, and I can't remember if it was Lyle or Erik, but he says, how would you expect me to have been a normal young man? How would you expect me to think like a normal young man when I have been having sex with my father since I was 7 years old?
Exactly.
On a regular basis. They did the math. It was more than 1,000 times.
Oh my God. That is so disgusting.
How does that not affect your ability to think? And turn it around. What if these were women?
Exactly. Although that being said, it was Sintona Brown that murdered her rapist, and she got something like 15 years in prison. And same situation, he had sexually assaulted her at like a stupidly young age. And then she got put in prison for it. And to me, that's not justice. So when comparing something like that, just because they're boys.
And the public and the judge and even the jury wanted to make an example out of them. And I really want to stress, I am not justifying their actions.
No, but I think it, in this particular case, deserves another look at.
I agree.
Like you say, they've served 30 years. Is it time to reconsider parole? I mean, they certainly seem to think so.
Because one of the things when someone is getting paroled, a lot of the time is you'll get victim impact statements, right?
Yes, exactly.
And that'll decide whether or not Paul Bernardo, the families of his victims, are there every single time he has any kind of appeal or any kind of trial, and they're reading how it has affected them. The families of their victims, who are the families of the perpetrators in this case, have said, we do not think that they should still be locked up. And I think something like that needs to be considered too.
Yes, absolutely. I've said it a few times. I think in cases like this, when it comes to these sort of heinous murders that involve really terrible things like sexual assault and rape and all that sort of thing, I think the families of the victims sort of deserve a say in what happens.
Absolutely.
And like you say, in this case, they clearly show their support for the brothers. I think it deserves to be considered.
If Gypsy Rose can be released, and I understand she didn't directly kill her mother, but she had a large part of it.
She certainly orchestrated it.
If she can be released and if she can have her baby registry and her TikTok and be on all of these different specials and get all this extra attention, why can't these two get paroled and just go and live quiet lives?
Yeah, absolutely.
Because what they're saying is not that I'm going to get out, I'm going to write a book, I'm going to tell my story. In fact, one of them said, I'm grateful that people are talking about us, but I also don't like it because we are being put on this pedestal of we're heroes. We did this. That's not the case. We did something terrible. We should not justify our crimes. However, it's nice that it's being talked about again. And I do appreciate it in that sense, but I don't love it. Whereas she is like,
she loves the celebrity of it all. And they are like, we could not want further from celebrity. We want to be left alone.
And they're almost 60 years old.
Yeah. And I mean, if they've got a good record in prison, they're not, like you said, fucking around and starting fights and getting into trouble, then that's what parole is for, right? Because parole, it's not like off you go into the freedom.
Yeah.
They're keeping an eye. There'll be conditions that they're expected to meet. And if they fuck up, then back to prison it is for you.
Exactly.
We tried it. It didn't fucking work. But yeah, I'm interested to see how this hearing in at the end of November goes. But because I feel like it really could go one way or the other.
It could go either way. Because the other thing too, one of the things that they consider when anyone is going on parole, is this person likely to reoffend?
Exactly.
I don't think so.
I don't think so.
And like I said at part 1, if you had asked me, we talked about them on whatever episode of Extra Credit it was when they first announced that they were going to start looking into this.
Yes.
I was on a whole other page. I
Same.
was like, this is stupid. We're releasing everybody. Absolutely not. I listened to one of my favorite podcasts who did an episode about them back in 2016 or so.
Okay, yeah.
And they literally just like made fun of them the whole time. They literally played like one of their testimonies in court and were laughing at them because they're like, oh, this is so fake. This is so fake. Looking back at it now, it's not.
I'm interested to see how many people actually, since everything has been so polarizing and people have been changing their minds and opinions, or at least reconsidering certain things, I'm actually interested to see how many people are still like pretty steadfast on where they began with. Like, do you think that they should still be locked up, or do you think kind of more like us where it at least deserves some reconsideration?
And I wonder how much of that is a generational thing. Because you and I are on the younger side of this spectrum.
Yeah.
And it seems to me like a lot of people our age and younger are saying that, hey, you know what? They deserve at least a revisit here. But I wonder how many people who are in their 50s and 60s or so are thinking the opposite. I wonder how much of that is a generational thing.
Well, when it comes to changing your mind, it can be a very uncomfortable thing to do. And if you were an adult back when all this was happening, so you're looking at it with a very grown-up mind, we obviously were not around for it, right? So having seen it literally unfold over the course of a few years back in the late 80s and 90s, right? And you're like, no, fuck them. Right. And it's like, I'm not changing my mind. I saw it all back in the day. Like, I'm good. I'm not changing my mind on this. Whereas we're kind of coming into it more where all the facts are already laid out in front of us and we kind of are able to consider everything. Although it's pretty wild to see something still having information unravel this late in the game as well, like 30 years later, and they're seeing this hearing come to play.
We are going to do an update episode, like
absolutely.
we said, because like Charlotte mentioned, it could go either way. It's impossible to predict what's going to happen in November.
Yeah.
And I stand where I stand, and I have changed my mind. And I think I'm not alone with that. I think a lot of people feel this way. Those are our opinions. Now, we want to hear your opinions on this.
Totally.
We want to know, do you think they should be freed? Where do you stand with all of this? Email us, thegrimcurriculum@gmail.com. We will read some of your comments during the update.
Yeah, I would love that, actually.
And I am just genuinely curious to see where other people stand, because this is one of those cases that I just have a lot of emotion towards, and I have a very strong stance about it, and I stand where I stand, and I am just really rooting for them.
Yeah, I think I am too.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we've come to that point in the episode where we just say a few things before we wrap up. Of course, we are on all the other social medias. We've mentioned Patreon, but you can comment your thoughts and questions and concerns at Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, YouTube, all that good stuff. Actually, speaking of Patreon, we also thank our wonderful Grim VIPs at the end of our episodes. That is the highest tier on Patreon, but there are a few other Patreon tiers as well. For free, you can join up, and that costs you obviously nothing a month.
$0.
You get those awesome episode reveals ahead of time. What else? Oh, on all of the paid tiers, you get to see the video versions of our episodes, so you can see our lovely faces reacting to all the foul and unusual nonsense that we talk about on a weekly basis.
Charlotte will sometimes leave extra stuff in too, which is super fun. And sometimes you guys get early access as well.
True. And I don't know where I was going with that. Anyway.
If you're on there, you're awesome.
Yeah, absolutely.
But the following people are especially awesome. A huge thank you to Mayhem Mudkip, Steven Centauri, Nova, Lisa, Kevinus Musicus, Hillary, Brian, Judy, Bob, Carrie, and Atlantean Jedi.
Thank you so much. You guys are the Titty City, the bee's knees, the cat's pajamas.
You're so cool.
You're so cool. So much cooler than everybody else.
Oh my God. Follow us on Twitch. That's twitch.tv/The Grim Curriculum. We did our second stream. It was a boatload of fun. We're going to do another one very soon. Charlotte is also doing Extra Life. Can we talk about that, please?
Yes, absolutely. If you follow me personally on the social medias, I'm usually Ominous Walrus in some way, shape, or form across the various platforms. I posted today about Extra Life Game Day. It's coming up November 2nd. Me and gamers all over North America and the world stream, play games, from video games to tabletop games for 24 hours straight. Actually, it ends up being 25 hours because that's when the time change happens.
Oh my goodness.
So we game for a good cause. Each city basically raises money for their local children's hospital. We're raising money for the Stollery Children's Hospital here in Edmonton. It's a great cause.
Go show her some support or else.
Yeah. If you feel like throwing some money their way, check out the links and stuff. They're probably everywhere. If not, you can DM and I'll send you where you need to go. But yeah, stay tuned for November 2nd. There should be some fun shenanigans happening.
Heck yeah.
Woohoo.
Thank you all so much for listening. This has been The Grim Curriculum.
And I have a fun blood-related fact for us today. Actually, let's turn it into a little quiz.
Okay. Oh, no.
What animal has type Q blood? It's a mammal. I'll give you that. Yes.
A sheep.
No, but you're kind of close in the farm animal aspect.
A cow.
No.
A pig.
No.
A chicken.
No.
That's not a mammal. What else lives on a farm?
Cowboys like them.
Horses.
Yeah. So horses actually have a lot of different blood types, but they also have type Q and I believe a type R as well.
That's fun. I didn't know that.
Yeah. So there you go. Fun fact.
Super fun.
Bye. And I also learned that birds, their blood types are, all birds can donate to all other birds.
That's fascinating.
Yeah, so like an ostrich could donate to like a mango.